Hey everyone, welcome to Product Stories Podcast. This is when I meet some of the best product and design folks in the industry. If you're on Apple Podcast or YouTube, do drop in a review. I would love to know what you think about the show. Our guest for today's episode is Sankalp Sinha. Sankalp is a senior product designer at SellersCrowd. Sankalp has been working remotely way before the pandemic. In this episode, we'll be talking about working remotely as a designer, collaborating while working remotely, and some of Sankalp's side projects as well. I'm your host, Kaushik Mulli, and you're listening to Product Stories. Hey, Sankalp, welcome to Product Stories. I'm so glad to have you here. You're one of the first people I discovered when I was starting out with design and especially product design. And it's just amazing to have you on my show here. So yeah, welcome. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Name is Sankalp Sinha. I have been working in the design industry, digital design industry for about 8 years now. Started with small companies here and there, then moved to Wingify, worked with them 3 years. These days, I'm working with a remote-based company, US-based remote company from Bangalore, India. I look after their design through and through. I have been working with them, I think, for the past 3 years. So I think, yeah. So that's where I'm at these days.
So you've been working for so long in the design industry, right? For at least over 8 years. What are like some of the insights and learnings that you have from working for the past 8 years that you would love to share with the listeners?
Right. Um, so I would say share from my experience of when I started my career, and different designers do it differently. I have always been inclined towards making stuff for the sake of it. I love tweaking stuff um, from high school, in college. And so what I would say to young designers is start making stuff if you are going to come into the design industry. The I think the most valuable skill is to about execution. So ideas, everybody can have ideas, but it matters how well you can execute it, or even start, for that matter. So my in my experience, I've always inclined towards like fixing stuff, be it like graphic design, logo design, or the last couple of years is about solving problems. So users designing stuff for them. And sometimes I also go towards itching my own back, which is working on side projects in and there. So all that spans to like I want to solve problems, and the best way to do that is to build your own. And that actually has helped me to build my career in terms of getting this remote job. I got this remote job because I remember from my interview 3 years back with this remote company was that I showed the hiring manager my side projects, and that showed that I can execute without external help that much. So yeah, in terms of if I have to just mention one thing about my career for the past 8 years is uh, work towards solving problems and execute. Doesn't matter how crappy your outcome is, you can always iterate. Uh, uh, and I'm also I'm also in the process of building my portfolio website these days. So I'm also in the process of doing that very iteratively. And I've noticed tons of designers and creators on Twitter are also doing this in this way, as in don't focus too much on. So there's a concept of MVP. You don't like need to ship a product which is like has animations, has all the flashy stuff. You can just ship a single um, Google Doc like page, like what you do, or here's a case study, or if you're, for example, building a side project, here's what I'm doing, here are some pictures, would you sign up? Uh, uh, so my philosophy has been that let's go towards execution as fast as I can, and as I grow in my career, I'm always rooting for how can I cut scope and ship faster so I can get data, blah blah blah. So execution becomes a constant habit versus I want to execute and go towards an outcome in like 6 months. No, I want to ship in like 1 week what I can ship. So yeah. I think that would be my one of the biggest advice for, or what I've learned from my 8 years of experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've also been seeing like more and more designers get themselves involved with side projects, right? Apart
Yep.
from their day job is to like, try to build something completely by themselves and try to execute as you said, right? I think that is like one of the important skills that art designers should have, which is the focus should be on execution, not just the design aspect or whatever you
Yep.
put on Figma or Sketch, right? Something which I have also learned from like from the past 1 year is that literally whatever work you do does not end at Figma or Sketch, but rather it ends only when it's been executed
Yes.
with your dev team. If it's if you're working on a side project, you are executing it by yourself. But if you're working on a project with your company or like it's a group project, then the execution, the design stops only when the execution is done with your engineering.
Right. Yeah, and I'd like to add one more point. So, in terms of execution, I've seen people focus. Uh, Execution is good, but then you also have to verify what you're building is making sense or not. You can't be sit in a corner and keep shipping without verifying if that works or not. That can mean if you have a small project, just talk to two people in the beginning to validate your idea. Like, hey, would you use it? If yes, execute it in shortest period of time and then put it into their hands and see if they're using it. So I think the pitfall there is that people ship with their own biases and they never validate if who they are building it for, uh, whether it's actually useful for them. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. Like, if you're not talking to users, then we're literally building it for ourselves, and
Yeah.
we'll never know if you're building the right thing. So I definitely agree with that.
Yep.
So coming to the next point, for the longest time, I've known you from through social media and everything, right? What I've known about you is that you're a remote designer, and this is not just limited to like when the whole world decided to like we'll have to work remotely or when
Yep.
they were forced to work remotely. You are someone who used to work remotely even before that, and I think you used to even travel and work at the same
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah.
So I would definitely want to understand like how you started out as working remotely and how it's been, how the entire journey has been.
Yeah. So it's first of all, it's been amazing. I'm never going back to an office. So that's let's get that out of the way. Let's go back to where how I came to value remote work. So I read this book called 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss in school in sorry in college, and I was very fascinated. Like people can actually do that. I the book focuses too much on how you can reduce the scope about your effort in a business. But what really fascinated me in that book is how can you automate, how can you delegate stuff and not worry too much. And I also read a couple of books along those lines. So I've always fascinated about like how can I dissociate myself from the office culture and still work because I like creating stuff. I just didn't like the notion of going to the office all the time. So it was always in the back of my mind, but uh, the design industry here in India is about like going to the offices, collaborating, so on and so forth. So as you start, you will maybe, if you're lucky enough, you would find for, and post COVID, there could be companies who are hiring remotely at the moment and may go remote full time. But to start with, given how the Indian space, the design space is, you would end up getting into an in-office job. So that's what I did. But then I kept doing side projects and collaborating with, taking up some client work here and there. So, and I liked them through and through. But after my stint with Wingify for 3 years, I'm like, I need a change, and I was looking out, and I started applying to Indian companies as well, and also some international companies. So international companies didn't work out for some of the companies who were looking out to relocate the designer to their own country, and I didn't want to relocate at that point in time. I still don't, but and then with the Indian companies, I was like, some things worked out, some things didn't. So I'm like, let me try remote for a second. So for the, I think I tried like 2 weeks of applying to Indian companies and international companies. I was not feeling great about how things are going with both of these segments. I'm like, let me put a filter of remote for the next 2 weeks. Let's see what happens. And surprisingly, I applied to a couple of them. Some went well, but didn't pan out. But this company, SellersCrowd, which I'm currently working with, so they gave me an offer. I joined them. This was my first remote company. So for the first 4 months, and back then I was in Pune with Wingify. I stayed in Pune for 4 months because I didn't want to move or start traveling, because I didn't know how would I like chart out my life around remote work. And this was a new company, so I didn't want to screw things up for myself or for them. I want to focus more on the work, so I establish myself, and then I can build from there about like how can remote change my working style. So after 4 months, I figured that okay, uh, things are great here. I'm designing. People are happy here. I'm happy. So it's time to like explore. Now I'm remote. What can I do? So that's when the idea, like not the idea, but what we see on social media or elsewhere, or we read stuff. I had the idea of, okay, I don't have a location yet to where I would be moving. And wherever whichever job I have picked, I've moved to that city always. I was with Wingify in Delhi, then Wingify opened an office in Pune. So it was option. So I moved to Pune to explore the city. And I never been to Bangalore, and Bangalore made sense in a way that all the design action is here in Bangalore in India. So it made sense if I want to stay in the design industry, I should move back to Bangalore. So that's when I decided to let's move my base from Pune to Bangalore first, and then I would start moving like traveling or exploring other options. So I moved to Bangalore. Then I had one more friend who's working with a Danish company, and he was working remotely, and he was my college friend. Like, yes, let's do this. He was like, welcome, welcome. So he was doing a remote. He was doing into the remote gig. I think 6 months prior to when I joined Selaka. So he was like, welcome to the remote environment. Settle down and let me know when you want to start. So he has been to Europe a couple of times before me with this company, and he was very enthusiastic about like, hey, we should do like a retreat somewhere. And that's where the things started happening. And I think I would not have done those long travels if it were not for this friend. So he and I started chatting, where can we go? So we went to Malaysia, we went to Thailand, we went to Singapore, most of the Asian countries. And these were like 2 to 4 weeks of stays. And the idea was not to go there as a tourist, because we wanted to work. If we want to work, you wouldn't be like seeing all the places. You can't do touristy stuff if you plan to work. And if you want to travel, you have to like take 2 weeks of break. And the whole idea of remote work is go on a place. So people, I've seen different remote workers doing this differently. So they would be like, hey, I'm going to go to a city for 2 weeks, work throughout the day, and during the nights and early mornings, maybe I'll just explore the city. And I figured me and my friend were not the type who want to like go see out all the locations. So we were like, let's just book a fancy resort. So we spend lavishly on the resorts and all the hotels we booked. So infinity pools, big beach resorts. And the idea was just go there, relax. And we for a definite reason, we booked these resorts or hotels for 4 weeks, for a month, because we want to work, enjoy the city life of the country, and then also like whenever in the weekend we have the mood, we want to definitely, we are in a different city, why wouldn't we go and explore? So that's the whole idea of like and we have seen those through Instagrams or books we have read. It's like that's how people do it, but we wanted to go a step further and not be just like a nomad, work like a nomad, but be there in the city, enjoy the city, see how people live and work. And I have noticed you can't actually experience the city if you just go there for like 1 week or 2 weeks. 2 weeks just flies by. So that was the whole experience we started doing, and and he and I, we couldn't make a ton of trips together, but wherever we went, we enjoyed thoroughly. And once I gained the confidence with him, I also started doing city tours or travel outside Asia, which is like European country. So yeah, but then COVID hit, and I think we are at a stage where we are not traveling anymore. But I'm itching to, not really itching, but like yes, if things slowed down, I would start like so my plan is to go once a year or twice a year to some country and stay there for a month or so and just work from there. So yeah, remote work, in terms of, that's how I started in remote work. And from my experience, I wouldn't like go back to an in-office space. And these days when I'm working from my home office, I have all the gadgets set up, but when I move out, we just make sure that we are traveling light, all the remote work, yada yada stuff. So yeah, it's fun. I would definitely like to do that more often, but let's see where COVID takes us for the next couple of months.
Yeah, definitely. That just sounds really exciting. The whole idea of, going to a different country and staying there for a month or two and experiencing the culture at the same time, actually living in the place and understanding what it's like, right? Yeah, that's like an exciting part of remote work, which which I think COVID has been acting as like a barrier for it for some time now. Um, but yeah, I think hopefully things will get better soon, and we can start traveling again. But yeah, one thing which I have as a question when it comes to remote work is,
Mhm.
how do you collaborate with other team members, other stakeholders, right? One of the biggest challenges which I've found is when the remote work started, right? Not everyone were ready for remote work.
Yes.
Not everyone was ready to have communication async. Not everyone were okay with working with people on different time zones. How do you tackle this challenge? How Since you have been working remote for so long, how do you navigate through this?
Right. So it's mostly about I think, the culture of the company. So what I've noticed as SellerCrowd and other remote companies is the culture is async. And what I also noticed when companies started going remote uh, post COVID is that they were struggling. So they wanted to go remote, but it's a culture. So you have to bring everybody on board to make this work. You can't say, for example, there's a team of 10 people, and five of them is super happy doing async communication, but five of them struggle. This won't work, more or less, because these five async ones would be like, hey, we are fine, we can schedule our work around mornings. I have a baby I need to take care, or I have a wife who I need to go out for dinner. um, so they would be fine. But for people who are in async, the five people who want to do the sync work, they're like, no, I'm capping my work period from morning 8 10 to 5 or 6, and I would want to collaborate more there. So they wouldn't find these other five async people, because they would be out. So, and I noticed that companies who have struggled here in India and abroad is, they the key piece that is missing is the mindset change from within the company to all the employees. Uh, until that's really done, I have seen uh, employees complain on social media, or my friends who are there in office companies, they all complain about, hey, this is really challenging. And for some people it's actually challenging who have families. So that's a key part of, like, you can't push everybody to do remote work. You shouldn't. Not everybody enjoys working from home in a corner office. um, So that's one aspect. The second aspect, so I'll now share how I have been collaborating. So as I said, this company and all the other remote companies who are remote first by nature, so they make sure that every communication is happening async. What I mean by that is all the work that you do has to be in a online repository. You can't have your work anything, even if you're thinking about some design direction, or if you want to give a thought about some to someone's work, you can't do that in isolation because the whole team needs to work together. And in an office it works because you can just get a meeting room and do that. Here you can't. So the change there is, first is the mindset change, second is the tools that you need to ensure, and the habit you need to form. The third is the habit. You have to constantly work with these tools with the mindset of, hey, I need to, if I have a thought, or if I have a, like for example, I'm exploring a design, I can't just send out to somebody on Slack, and for example I go on leave the next day, someone else would want to know, hey, what did Sankalp work on, or what was the output from that exploration? And they would miss that, and they would be pinging me on my vacation or my leave day. So the idea is to put everything that you think or write or show in an online repository, and your whole team should be in a loop of, or if not loop, then they should have a link all the time that, hey, if you want to explore Sankalp's work, here's where you should go. Here's what Sankalp is working on. This is the link. So so I'll touch base on how we do our collaboration from end to end. So and I think a good example would be how, when I'm starting a design sprint. So the first would be, we have an idea what we want to work on. So we capture everything in a Kanban board in Notion. So that's a online repository for what the whole team in the company, product team, is thinking about. So that could be new ideas, old ideas, customers who have asked some features, so on and so forth. So everybody has visibility on what the product team can work on. And then we have these columns in Kanban defined that, hey, these are the old backlogs ideas. The second one is discussion phase. So whenever we are discussing an idea, we move that to that column. So everybody again knows, okay, this is being discussed at the moment. Then third column is designing. So when we move to the design phase, which is, I mostly do that in the company, is we move that then to the design process. So again, everybody has an idea. Hey, Sankalp is designing on this. This is in works. Then again, if that is moved to writing requirements when I'm done, and then dev handoff, and then done staging and so on in between. So that's how we gather the uh, 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 current state of design, at least from design perspective. And for example, I'll quickly give you an example of how devs do that. Devs do that on GitHub. So again, I have visibility if I go into GitHub. So there's I think Chrome extension from ZenHub for GitHub, which actually converts your issues into a Kanban board, which is great. So then I also have visibility of, okay, which other things devs are working on. Again, GitHub has these features of, if you want to assign things to others. So I also have visibility on what devs are working on. So that's number one in that aspect of how I start the work. And when I'm designing, so in that Notion doc, I also make each issue or a feature a card. And if I'm working on that, I'll document, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Here are the designs that I explored. And I then copy that segment's link from Notion, put it on Slack group channel. Hey, these are the variations we tried. What are your feedback? And the feedback is, again, team will go back and give those feedback to Notion, or that may sometimes happen on Slack. But again, this is again open to everybody to see. So even I'm rigorously and religiously jotting down my progress of what I'm working on, what I'm thinking, what are the variations I'm trying. Here's the final result. So there's a common source of truth for for discussions for everybody on the team. So I'll wrap this up. This became very long-winded, but I'll wrap this up by saying that if you want to do remote work, you have to do first, you have to do the mindset change towards async communication. Second is you have to uh, uh, log everything in a single repository. You could use various tools. And then third is that consistency part, which is you have to habituate yourself to do this too all the time. Um, and so far, from my experience, nobody has ever complained that, hey, Sankalp, you were on leave for 2 weeks or 1 week and we couldn't find that stuff, because it's always out there. And that's what I think the whole point of teamwork is. Like, if you're in office, how does the team gets work done? It's by collaboration. So if you're going remote work, doing async, you have to restructure the team in a way that they can actually collaborate. I think that's where a ton of companies have struggled. They think that if you flip the switch in a day, the collaboration would keep happening as it would. It would not, because a different because this switch is about async. It's not about sync. You can't expect everybody, and this could be different for you and me. Like uh, we have a room to ourselves, but it's not the same for everybody, right? People are living in smaller homes. They have a bigger family, uh, kids passing by, you have to go grab groceries and so forth, delivery guys coming up. So you have to, the sync work won't work if you're working from home. So you have to go async, or you can do a mix of both. But then again, that depends. For example, I've seen companies doing mixture of async and sync work, and you might have seen it's a buzzword going on LinkedIn these days, the flex work. So flex work meaning you can come to office for 2 days and you can work from home for 3 days. I'm not sure how that
Uh,
would work.
Hybrid
I
model.
I I have my doubts about it, but to be yet to be seen. But point is, whatever you plan as an organization, you have to bring everybody on board. Yeah.
True, true. Yeah, I definitely agree with those points because I've been on the other side of remote work, right? Which is, as you said, the switch was suddenly flipped and like in a day, and everyone were just asked to adjust with it. And that is completely true about the async part because I have noticed there are a couple of team members on my team who prefer doing work synchronously, but there are people who prefer doing async. And at the same time, I think the whole point of logging everything, keeping everything open, I think that's kind of where the whole idea of documentation becomes more and more important because until now you could just do something you could just sit down with a person and get it done, but now the whole idea of documentation has so much emphasis, right? Because it's not just the two people who is involved, but it's more it could be visible to everyone else, right? So yeah, I mean, I totally get this part, right? But there are certain challenges which comes with remote work as well. Especially in a scenario where the company is not completely into remote work or don't want to work remotely. And what are some of the challenges which you think are coming up and will come up both in companies who are culturally driven to make it remote, but at the same time, companies who are just forced to work remotely.
Right. So, company who have already been remote, for example, my company, um, I haven't seen a ton of problems there, because it's, as I said, it's the foundation is remote first, and everybody is on board. Like, I was onboarded. You have, as in, you have to be remote first. You have to be asynchronous. You can't do sync work. If you choose to, then you would struggle because everybody is async. With yeah, and for example, a couple of companies who I know, and my couple of friends work there. For example, Automatic, Post Hog. These companies who I have noticed, who have again set up their foundation as remote first. I haven't seen a ton of complaints from or struggles, because like remote first is very new for India, but for US and European countries, they have been one or two steps ahead in terms of setting up their companies remote first. So all the challenges that I would say that may have come up would have been during the early days. And there's a decent playbook from GitLab, WordPress, Automatic, the parent company. These new companies, they have a playbook from old companies who have already set up a remote first company. So they are skipping all the weaknesses and they're focusing on the strengths. So weakness, I'll just quickly touch base on that, which is the weakness is, again, you can't do sync work if one of the person is doing sync work. So if I am opening a new company today and want to build a remote first company, I would make sure nobody's doing sync work. So things like how would you set up the payment of these employees? What are the tools you would want to use? What is the communication channel? What are the number of sprints we would run? These things are already answered from bigger companies or who have been like remote first for 10 years now. So if you set that up, you wouldn't face any problems. Now, coming back to the point where old companies or new companies who haven't been remote first and now being pushed because of COVID, or they just want to try. As I said, number one is that is cultural mindset change. The second I've noticed is, again, the India is such a different culture. For example, in the West, people don't live with. It's not a joint family scenario in the West or the US. So it's either you're living with your wife or at most kids, but you don't have parents. So involving parents in the house is very unique to India, or maybe with in other countries as well, mostly Asian countries. So that becomes a challenge. So when you have to, so in India, if you're going remote first for because of COVID for temporary basis or permanent basis, you have to ensure that these employees who can't actually work from home, you have to give them options. But options could be give them WeWork access or a co-working space access. Allow them to come to office, rent a smaller space office. So these are the challenges. So that's the space, and uh, I think the number problem, which is like you can't bring everybody on board for a country like India because of these said reasons. The number two, even if you uh, bring these people on board, the challenge again remains because some people are not going to office. They would want to do sync work. They have a tagged time from 10 to 6. Um, so that again becomes a challenge. Like, how does everybody work? Um, in terms of communication, you already have pointed out, and I did mention that about logging stuff. What I've noticed is when you start doing a ton of collaborative stuff, and we have done that all the time in office, uh, you mostly delegate these notions of who's going to document this stuff, right? So there's a PM. Now, when there's no PM or you're working async with the PM, you still have to, like, for example, I'll take a small case here, because we're both designers. When you're designing, you have to communicate your idea to somebody. How do we do that? And I've seen people do like ping PMs, hey, let's just go get on a call. And now that again becomes a challenge. Are you available? Or we schedule for half an hour, but this actually needs more work. So the call now spanned to an hour from 30 minutes. So these little challenges. So what I've seen is, in terms of communication, as I've mentioned before, documentation is a really key part if you want to do async work. And I'm still seeing people not focusing too much. See, the companies who have gone remote here in India, they can still come back to the office. But the point is, if you and then employees are seeing these benefits of working from home, and people employees have resisted coming back to office. So what do you do with these in situations like? So I think the idea is to again, along with the mindset change, you have to coach people to start documentation, communicate better. Because when you're in the office, it's very easy to tap on somebody's shoulder, like, "Hey, let's just change that." But when you're not in the office, or there's a mix of working culture, you have to ensure that everybody's writing, everybody's good in communication. And this is something I think this is the biggest challenge in remote work. Uh, Apart from the expectations, like everybody expected this, you have noticed from your friends and other companies, that people expect you to be online all the time. It again this is again it comes in that umbrella, under that mindset change, that you're working from home, so there would be responsibilities that you also have to attend to while you're at home. So you don't need to be online. So apart from being online, or the other uh, yada yada stuff, I think the communication is a major part, the expectation is a major part. So these are the challenges I'm noticing in the companies who are now going remote. But they're not focusing on the challenge. They're expecting employees to work like it's usual business as usual.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree with all the points you mentioned. And one of the other things which I probably want to bring bring up is, like, something which I have personally faced, and I've been hearing a lot from other folks also who are working remotely now, is that um, people tend to get burnt out when they're working remotely. And this is something I've personally faced as well, as I mentioned. Um, and and this was not so common. I mean, what I've heard from them is, like, this was not so common when we were working out of office. It did not feel like, it's they did not feel exhausted because there were people all around. It work felt a lot more easier. So one of the things which I would like to ask you is, like, how can one avoid burnout while they're working remotely?
One of the key things that I've noticed that people are not doing in terms of uh, maintaining a healthy work-life balance is, and this again can be tied down to the last point we were talking about, which is expectation. So people are being expected to be online all the time, respond whenever the manager is pinging them. So in a, again, this also starts with a remote first culture, which is like, when you set up a remote first culture, you don't have to worry about people being online all the time. So what I've noticed here at SellersCrowd is you are not expected to uh, be online all the time. Number one. Number two, if somebody is asking you a question, you don't need to respond immediately until production is down, which doesn't happen that much. Apart from that, I'll tell you how I've been doing it. So we work on a Eastern time zone. So I go online around 12ish Indian time, around noon, and I cap by 7 or 8 p.m. every day. But in between, I go on lunch. I take mini breaks. So by doing these, I'm ensuring that I'm not burning out. If I'm not feeling well, I'm like, let me come back to replying to you like tomorrow if it's not very urgent. These are case to case basis, but in a remote first culture, you're not expected to answer right away or be online all the time. So but I would say, if so, that's what I am doing. If I have to give a suggestion to people who are working remotely at the moment, and they're seeing a ton of mental stress or burning out at the moment, my suggestion would be, uh, talk to your manager, see if you can tone down the expectation, which is like, do I have to be online all the time? Do I need to respond to all the, try to cut down also on meetings if you can, because again, this is again a psychological thing which I've noticed is that managers and even reportees who have liked seeing people in the office and communicating with people all the time, they have this urge to like be in contact with people all the time. So you will also notice that people are pinging you to chat, to do water cooler conversation, which are fine, which is fine. But then it takes up your day a ton, because you and I can chat very free flowing on a Zoom call or an in person if you and I were in an office. But it's very tiring to do a chat or catch up, just, hey, how was your weekend? So it's very tiring to. And for example, if you have 5 or 6 good friends in office, everybody would come up on Monday and say, hey, how was your weekend? And you have to reply the same thing to like 5, 10 people. And by the time you know that you're done with the chat, it's already 2 hours in the into the day. So I think the so what I do is I don't engage that much. Hardly, maybe 1 or 2 colleagues of mine is like, how was your weekend? That's it. We don't engage that much in office gossip, which is like, so that, I'm trying to highlight a point, which is, um, if you're doing remote work, there's already a ton of changes that you need to do. Take care of documentation, make sure everything is online, make sure everything, there's a common source of truth, so on and so forth. So definitely the number of work and the quality of work, quantity and quality of work uh, gets raised a little bit if you want to keep that and work remotely. So working remotely has its benefits, but you also need the work to be done to keep keep those benefits. So you need to cut down onto some of the benefits that you may have noticed in office. And it's perfectly fine if you don't want to, like, if you think that you are not very comfortable in documenting and you hate it, feel free to keep going into co-working spaces or go to your office and do those collaborations there. But if you want to stay in office, then the couple of ways you can cut down your uh, mental stress and burning out and maintain a healthy work-life balance is fix a time of your working. It need not be like 8 hours of solid block, but it could be 12 hours or 10 hours of block. And you can take like 2 hours or 1 hours of mini breaks here and there, or long breaks. Uh, uh, yeah. So, and it also depends on your context, like where are you living, who you're living with, and so forth. But I would suggest that for managers, they have to be open. They have to be a little bit open towards giving flexibility in terms of when people can work. What's the urgency of things? Because I've seen mostly in the Indian space, everything is urgent. It's not. It's not urgent, and this is how the remote first culture differs. Is not everything is not urgent until the production is down. It's not urgent really. It's just a uh, uh, what was the word? I forgot the
Mindset.
word. No, I forgot the word.
Mindset.
It's not the mindset. Uh, high. I forgot the word. It's a created urgency. So there was a word for it. I forgot. But it actually uh, false urgency that you're projecting on the team. Hey, if we need this today. But actually, when I send out the designs to you, you don't look at those for like 2 days and you say it was urgent. No, it wasn't. You're just trying to be managerial. That's all. So I think the best way to cut down mental health and be a little bit more sane while working is talk to your manager, figure out what are the things that you like and don't like. Take mini breaks. For example, one of the hacks I do is I keep a glass of water with me on the desk. So whenever and in front of me, so whenever that gets empty, I'm like, yeah, this is empty. I need to move up. Use a Pomodoro technique. So clock like 25 or 30 minutes of time to do focus work and then roam around for 5 minutes. And have a cap, like when you want to close your day off, have that time in your head. Uh, and make that expectation clear with your boss that, hey, I'm going to be off by 8 p.m. until production is down. What are your thoughts? So you have to be like, you can't be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Uh, uh, you have to agree, because then you'll get fired. But you have to approach this more towards like, hey, we are going remote. These are the things I'm facing, and I have some suggestions on the solutions. What are things? What do you think about this? What are your suggestions? Open to discussion. If you're a reportee, but if you're a manager, you need to be a little bit more open and stop creating fake urgency. That would be my suggestion to managers and reportees. Yep.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all these points. I mean, these are some of the points which I think right now when I think about it, these were like, certain boundaries, certain habits which I could have developed, which would have definitely avoided a burnout and which would have made remote work a lot more easier for someone who has never done remote work, right? So yeah, but at the same time, uh, like even though we have been talking about remote work for quite some time, uh, I mean, majority of the people we know have been working remotely for almost 2 years now. What do you feel are still like, some unexplored opportunities that comes with remote?
For companies who have already been who have already set up their remote culture, I don't see a ton of changes to keep them happy and produce good work and promote work-life balance. But for companies who are in India, you can't take the playbook from the US and European countries and stick it on Indian companies. So because the context is very different, how people live and people want to work is very different. um, so I think there's tons of opportunities in terms of like innovating for what are things my, and this could vary from company to company because uh, what may work in an Indian company of 2000 people may not work in a startup in India. um, and it also depends on whether you want to work remotely or not. For example, in startup culture, people are very cautious about starting remote. In India, they're like, no, we want you in office, in Kormangla, in this co-working space, or in the office because we want to stay in stealth mode. So if you like, and there's wide range of people's demands, and some people will fill those roles, some people will not. So I would just say that there's, again, if you want to build a remote first company here in India, or if you're going remote first, temporary or permanent basis, there's tons of opportunities that you can do uh, uh, to cater these changes to Indian specific to Indian companies. So as I said, I think tying this back to your question is that yes, there are tons of opportunities, and if you ask what are those, I would say to start with, do the same things that at least pick up the foundational changes, which is the mindset change, the collaboration, the communication, all those. At least do those, and then you'll figure out on your own that which is working for your company and which is not.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the opportunities which I feel that comes with remote work is for as individuals, right? Not from a company perspective, but rather as individuals, is that now you have enough time to work on all the side projects which you wanted. That's where I see personally is the biggest advantage that comes with remote work. Um, which also brings me to the point of like talking about your side projects, which is one of it was a Chrome extension and another was a web app, right? Yes, CSS and Rooster. So I would definitely want to talk a bit about that.
Yep. So first of all, I think there's not much difference in terms of getting extra time from if you're working remote or not. Most of these side projects I've done over the weekends. These days, I'm not doing any side projects. So talking about side project, I think the biggest things that I like doing about those is sketching my own back. Is what are the problems that I'm noticing? So Rooster is a Chrome extension which we had an idea. So I'm a lot into productivity, time management, and so forth. So one of my colleagues at Wingify, when I was working there, he was toying with the ideas and he was learning how to build a Chrome extension. He was toying with an idea of, so there's a, I think D3 Pi chart is a open source chart library. So he was toying with this idea, hey, whatever I'm browsing on the internet, can it give me a visual idea of what I'm browsing? And I saw him working on that, and that's where I also explored that idea further. It's like we can actually let users know that if you don't want to spend too much time on, say, for example, on Facebook, you can add it to your filtered lists, and add a time, like add a time limit of 10 minutes, and once I cross that time limit, notify me. And so this was the functional idea. The catchy phrase of Rooster came from that idea of the roosters make to wake you up every morning. So it's basically a nudge which roosters make to, like, hey, it's morning, wake up, you're sleeping a ton. So that catchphrase came onto, we injected that into the product. Like, okay, this is Rooster. This will tell you and show you how, where you're browsing, how much you're browsing, and if you want reminders when you slip off and spend too much time on uh, time wasting sites, which it's subjective. So you define your own time wasting websites, and will the app will notify you. So we launched that, I think, in 2018. So me and this friend of mine, we both worked on this. He was doing the back end and the logic and everything. I was doing the landing pages, execution, all that stuff. It was good. We launched that, and we got like what 2,000 users in 6 months. We launched it on Product Hunt, and it was doing it. But again, the things with side projects that we have to constantly keep on those to grow them. And then another side project hits you, and you're like, yeah, okay, let's work on a new idea. Uh, on side projects, I would say my take has always been about, okay, here's an idea, cool idea, let me work on it. But these days, I still get tons of ideas. I write them on Notion, but I don't start working on them because right now my focus has changed. So side projects, I would say, for people who are starting out, is great to build up skills like execution, design thinking, product thinking, project management. If you want to do front end coding, that's also great. Uh, and when you're shipping, then again, there's tons of design things you can do. Like you can create email banners, you have to create videos if you want. So it's a great way to add new skills to your skill set. But so I would say that do as much Cypress you would want in your early days. It will add tons of experience. It also gives you autonomy, right? So this is something I've noticed in companies. Like you're not the sole decision maker for your product that you're working on in your company, right? So there were things that, so side projects, more than adding to your skill set, also gives you that creative control that you would want on your company's product, but you're not getting. So it's a good way to like keep that energy satisfied through side projects. So I've done that during my initial days. Yes, CSS was another tool that we thought of doing, and this was when we were learning. Uh, when I was learning doing HTML and CSS, I was like, are there tools online who are like, can I make some changes on sliders and other components, and there will be a visual way of seeing those buttons, for example, and it shouldn't be so back then the way was like you have to design in Figma, Sketch back then, and then you will send out to developers. You're like, yeah, but if I want to suggest the developer to make that button in a specific way in CSS, I don't want to go into Sketch. Can I do that on the fly? Is there a web tool? Of course, you can do that on your Chrome browser as well. But we thought, and we researched, and there were there were tools already, but the visual, the how things were laid out in those tools were not really user friendly, we thought. So that was one thing. So this, I think this was the idea that came from me, but then I didn't know front end coding and back end coding that well back then. So I again collaborated with two of my college friends, like, hey, will you develop these? So, but we never came around shipping, like publishing those to the web, but we keep those links on our profile silently, and people have reached out and like, hey, this is a great tool, help me get css code of a button very easily. So yeah, and before that we have also worked on a couple of other side projects in college. But so all in all, side projects is awesome. These days I'm much more focused on, if I'm building on a side project, working on side project, how I am going to monetize it. So my focus has changed from I want to execute and give it to the hands of users and make them happy and keep serving them, towards like, if I'm um, so while doing all those from the past, can it also pay me? So, and not a ton of ideas actually pass those barriers when you start researching, so on and so forth. Uh, so yeah, I have tons of ideas back of the mind even now, but I'm not very interested in pulling a trigger on one of these because of the research is like the effort. But yeah, if I have to jump on start doing it, I can do that anytime. But I want to like focus more on monetary, at least play with the idea of how can something pay me. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like the whole concept of side projects is just brilliant, and it has helped me a lot in general as well to learn a lot of things, especially to understand things in the growth side, to understand things like how to build a product right from ground up, right?
Yeah.
Side projects does give like a ton of insights. Yeah. So, anyways, we have actually reached like almost the end of the
Yeah.
episode. I
Yeah.
usually end end my episodes with like a bunch of rapid fire questions. So I've prepared a set of questions. Just let me know when you're ready, and we can just
I'm
get
ready.
started.
Yes, I'm ready. Shoot.
Great. So, generalist or specialist?
Generalist.
Your favorite designer?
Favorite designer, I would say I was into industrial design before I made the switch to digital design. So I look up to Dieter Rams a ton because of his principles on industrial product design, which also applies to a ton
Yeah.
of general design as well.
Yeah. I like a lot of Apple's designs was also inspired by
Yeah. Yes.
his work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually wrote this question down. I mean, quite some time back. The next question, but you answered that question like in the very first half of the episode. It was like, would you ever go back to working from an office?
No, definitely no. I mean, until so this year, I'm actually thinking of looking out. So I'm not sure if my luck is out, and job market is a ton about luck. If my luck is out, I wouldn't find any remote jobs. Then I would maybe toying with an idea of doing something in office. But again, Indian companies have been hiring remotely, so we'll see. But first choice is
Great.
definitely remote.
Okay. So your favorite location to work from, it can be a country, it can be a city, anywhere.
I really like working from European countries because of the accessibility of cafes and friendliness of cafes. Wi-Fi is always there. You can move in and out of different cafes. The public transport is great. So I would say when I'm working out, not from when I what I mean is working outside my house. My only take is Wi-Fi is good, coffee is good, coffee or food is good, and if I go out, I don't need to think about figure out transportation. It shouldn't be harder for me to figure out transportation to move from A to B, which I've seen European countries do well.
Great. So the last question, one advice you would give your younger self.
Um, could have tried remote a little bit earlier, I would say, but I don't regret that much. But I think, yeah, maybe if I could try remote a little bit earlier, then yeah, that's it.
Great. Amazing. So we have finally reached the end of the episode. It's been a brilliant time having this conversation with you. At the same time, ton of insights about remote work and how remote work can be done differently, and how you can avoid things like burnout, how to overcome these challenges that comes with remote work. So definitely, it has been an insightful episode for me. I loved the conversation, and I hope you loved it too.
I loved it.
Uh,
I can go a ton about remote work. There's tons of things that people can change, but it's like you can't fit them all into 1 hour episode. Yeah. And
yeah,
there's tons
definitely.
of challenges for
But
Indian companies. The more I talk to my friends here in India working with in office companies, the challenges are like is there a manager challenge, there's a cultural challenge, then there's a tooling challenge, communication challenge, and then these 4 or 6 categories branch out into multiple other categories. So it's fun to see the world go remote, but I'm not sure if the world is ready to go remote. So we have seen companies revert back to in office, and some of the companies have already started asking people to come to the office. We'll see how that pans out. But yeah, for me, and as I said, remote is not for everybody. Some people, because of their circumstances and by then preference as well. So it remains to be seen. I would be very curious to see how companies work the remote thing out for the next 2 to 3 years. Indian companies mostly. We'll see.
definitely. Anyways, it has been a great episode. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining me. It
Yeah.
was
Pleasure.
it was wonderful having you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Product Stories for more such episodes.